Welcome to Benevolence, where kindness matters and all are welcome to the table. I'm your host, S5.E6. As always, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for supporting Benevolence Podcast. I pray that as you tune in every week, you are empowered, blessed, and encouraged to be the best version of yourself. You are tuning into episode 6, My Dear Wanderlust. And on this episode of Benevolence, I have a very special guest who will be joining me at the table. Our special guest is one of the bravest, most adventurous people I know. I've known her for a long time, and we've shared beautiful memories together. I call her my walking diary because we have bonded so closely throughout the years, and she has known my heart way before Benevolence even came to pass. And I'm so excited to have her join me at the table today. So without further ado, I have the one and only Genesis Morales joining me at the table. This conversation was recorded digitally due to our season of social distancing. So make sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy this wonderful episode with my dear friend, Genesis Morales. Enjoy. All right. Well, first, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, this is exciting.
I reached out to you because obviously I've been wanting to reach out to you for a long time, but I was like, man, I don't even know, like, does she have a computer? I don't know anything about like what you were doing over there, obviously. So that's why I'm like, okay, let me call Jen, let me talk to her, and we can do this podcast together, and you could just let us know what you've been doing all these years.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much.
Of course, girl. I wouldn't have it any other way. Tell me a little bit about yourself. So some basic information, upbringing, family, and how you got to where you've been in Panama.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my name is Genesis Morales. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, to a very Christian household. My parents are pastors now, but they've always, gone to church and done all of that. Let's see, my family, very conservative, but I think that goes hand in hand with just being Pentecostal and stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see, because I grew up in church, there would be a lot of like mission Sundays and things like that. And I remember there was one Sunday when I was like 14 or 15 in one of the churches that we used to go to, where this missionary came and he showed a PowerPoint of his work in China. And I just remember that day, I was like, okay, I need to do something like that.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of, felt like I had to get to China one day. And that's when I also kind of realized that I wanted whatever work or job I got into to be of service to people, whether that was through the church or, through other means. So I guess that's kind of how it started. And I went on after that, like my family moved churches, and that's how we ended up in Calvario. And that's how I was able to go on my first mission trip to China with the pastors and the board of pastors in the church. And after visiting China that first time, I was like, okay, now I need to come back. Like I knew I wanted to come back to live. And so I guess that's kind of how like the hunger for it started. And eventually a couple years later, I did go back, but through teaching English. So yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. So what other places have you visited throughout your life? So you mentioned China, but just whatever else.
Let's see. So I went to, obviously, China. When I was in China, I was able to visit Indonesia, and that was another life-changing experience. It was amazing. And let's see, I've been to Panama, Colombia. I think that's it, really.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's good. So how you went to China for teaching English, and it was through virtual, or were you like face to face with the students?
Yeah, I was face to face with the students. So the company is called English First, and it's one of like the most basic companies, very popular. They don't pay very well, but it's kind of like for students who are just out of college and want some traveling experience. So I applied with them virtually, and then they paid for everything, and I ended up living in Beijing. And I was, teaching the students at the school and face to face. So it wasn't virtually. It was
And
really
how
cool.
and how was your experience there? Like, how were the kids, and like
Yeah.
things that we don't usually know about the
Uh-huh.
Chinese culture?
So the first couple of impressions I got was that the students were very disciplined. The stereotype is true. A lot of my students had many other classes they would take. So our school was sort of like an after-school program, and students would come voluntarily, or the parents would make them, to learn English. And so a lot of the classes were usually on Saturday or in the evenings. And a lot of my students actually had other classes. So they would come to our class, let's say a Saturday morning, and then after my class, they'd go to like violin lessons. And after that, they'd have swimming lessons. And so my first sense of the culture and diving into like a classroom setting was that the students were very education oriented, like
Yeah.
education and things like that were very important to them, and to the families. And a lot of times the parents would sort of, like brag about their kids, like, yeah, my child does this, and they also have these classes and these. So that was very kind of like a culture shock in comparison to us, in the States, where
Yeah.
a lot of times after school, like kids would complain about homework and be like, no, I want to play video game,
My God.
just
Yeah.
different.
And then what about the people, like the adults, like out in the city? How is it different?
That was also a big culture shock, but the people were very much like reserved. So initially, like meeting people or just walking in the street, you could think that people are very cold or not friendly. But once you break the ice, or you start talking, or I would try to speak Mandarin, the little that I knew, and people really appreciated that. And then that's when people would sort of open up and smile or laugh or joke with you.
Yeah.
And I asked a lot of my Chinese coworkers about it. I was like, why do people seem this way? And they sort of explained to me that for Chinese people, and this, maybe is a generalization, but this is what she told me, that people in China, they sort of take care of their family. Family is such an important thing, culturally, that, if you're in their family or if you're someone close to them, they will like, go to the end of the world for you. But,
Yeah.
if you're a stranger or someone they don't know, they tend to be more reserved, more shy. So that was something I found really interesting.
I always ask this, and I think I've asked you this.
Hmm.
How does it smell over there?
Yeah. So that's a funny one. A lot of times, because I was in Beijing, which is like the capital, and there's a lot of people, there were a lot of moments where walking the street, it sort of smelled like urine,
Okay.
because people just pee outside. A lot of times children would just take off their pants anywhere and pee.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it was kind of funny, kind of interesting. But honestly, after a couple of months I got used to the smell, I didn't
Yeah.
even feel it anymore. And there's also like the smell of the spices. I think that that's something that's so different. The way that the food is seasoned over there is like
Yeah.
unlike I've ever tasted anywhere,
Wow.
So
That's
that was
crazy.
really,
What were some of the biggest adjustments and challenges you had to make, like when you started living in China?
yeah. Let's see, so many, but I think okay, so first off, the cold. Beijing is kind of close to Russia.
Okay.
So it was freezing. And I am a Floridian / Puerto Rican. I don't do the cold well, you know. So I had to adjust to that and get some like warm coats and some shoes that I could use to walk around if it got icy and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. Let's see what else. I had to get used to the squatting toilets. You
Explain.
know, there's so yeah, so there are no toilets, you know, toilets where you can sit down, kind of like in the States. It's a kind of like a hole in the ground, but it's not just a hole in the ground, it's like the toilet material, so the ceramic.
Okay.
Um, and it's, you know, it's a flushable toilet, like the inside looks like a toilet with the hole and the water.
Mm-hmm.
But you just place your feet and squat and you pee. And generally, people are more reserved about going number two in
Mm-hmm.
these. So, not many people did.
Oh my
People
God.
usually just go pee and walk out, you know, they don't, you know, wash their hands with soap or anything. But so that was kind of weird to just kind of have to carry my toilet paper around if, you know, if I needed to go, and always have hand sanitizer or soap on me, just because I knew there wouldn't be any in the bathroom.
Now, were you prepared for this? Did they give you this information before going, or you just literally went and it was just like that was what you came across? Like,
Yeah. So, because I went that first trip for like a couple days, I kind of had an idea, and I was able to talk to some missionaries who had been there before, and they sort of prepared me for all of this. But from that point to, I don't know how many years later, when I was able to get a job and go back, it sort of all slipped my mind, you know, and it was like a new culture shock all over again. And you know, they're not things that are like impossible. Like they do it all the time, right? This is how
yeah.
they live.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of like, oh yeah, like I gotta remember, you know, I gotta remember that. And so it was a challenge, but I don't know. I like to think that I do well with changes, which is why I'm fine with traveling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got used to it pretty quickly.
Okay. And what about the language? Did you learn it like quickly, or did you just did you learn some basics? Like, how did that work out for you?
So the language was, it's a completely different language that doesn't even have like letters, you know,
Yeah.
or like the alphabet. So it was kind of a challenge, but I don't know. I love the culture so much, and it's honestly one of my favorite places in the world. I really think about it, and like after, you know, grad school and things, I hope to go back. Like I loved it so much that I sort of made it a point to learn it. And I feel like, I don't know, my friends and my Chinese like counterparts and stuff would tell me that I picked it up pretty quickly, which I was like, oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I would ask my coworkers like, hey, how do I say this? You know, how, and then so I would learn like one phrase per week. And I would just start using that phrase the whole week.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, I would sometimes say it, you know, probably incorrectly or with a really bad accent, but, you know, people were nice enough to like try to understand me. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I picked it up pretty well. And one of my favorite things to do would be just chat to the like taxi drivers,
Mm-hmm.
because they're like stuck in the car with you, you know, and so I would tell them like where to go and things like that, and I would practice how to say those things, and it was really fun.
That's awesome. That's so
Mhm.
cool. Um, so moving on, so what did you miss most from America while you were living in China?
Let's see. I remember this was later on after I'd been there a while and sort of had gotten homesick, but I remember missing like fast food restaurants, but not like McDonald's and Wendy's. Like I'm talking like Olive Garden and Chili's. And
Okay.
I missed like sitting or like, yeah, with my family going to one of these restaurants. Like, you know
Okay.
how after church you go with your family. So
Yeah.
I really, it's kind of random, but I really missed just sitting down at a restaurant. Particularly, I remember missing Olive Garden a lot. and just having dinner with my family. Just
Aw.
because over there, I know, over there, like they had restaurants and stuff, but they were sort of pricey and I couldn't, always go to them.
Yeah.
And the foods were more like street food and, things like that, which were delicious, but I did miss those restaurants.
Wow. That's funny. That's really funny.
Uh-huh.
Because I would have imagined something else. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know.
but that's awesome. So now you moved on to, you were living in Panama.
Mhm.
So now that you were living in South America, because now you're currently back home in Puerto Rico due to what's
Yeah.
going on globally,
Mhm.
what did you miss? So once you got to South America and you started living there, and obviously in Panama, what did you miss from China?
Mm.
Not from America. What did you miss
Yeah,
from China?
from China. Let's see. I do remember actually comparing Panama a lot to China when I first
Really?
moved.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, like, man, I think, let's see. I think what I miss most about China was the depth in culture.
Okay.
China has so much history and
Yeah.
so much, like, you can literally walk around and just see the history, and the
Hmm.
buildings and the way things are designed and the way everything is just structured. And so in Panama, it's different, they have a different kind of history. And I feel like I was missing that cultural depth or cultural history, I guess I would
Yeah.
call it.
Okay.
Um, and the food.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, so moving on and transitioning on to what you're doing now.
Mhm.
Um, so where where were you located? Because now I have
Mhm.
to change these questions around
I
because
know.
like you're not there now. But where were you located and what brought you there?
Okay. So I was in Panama, in the Veraguas province, in a city or town called Cañazas. Um, and I was there because I was serving in Peace Corps. So the reason I applied, I guess, to Peace Corps was again going back to that China video or
Mhm.
PowerPoint that I saw. Like, I knew I wanted to do something of service. And Peace Corps is such a great organization. Um, and it provides sort of good connections and networking for when you come back into the country, that I knew it was a really good opportunity for me for my career, but also just for integrating and learning about other cultures. And the reason I ended up in Panama was just because I applied and said send me anywhere,
Mhm.
and they sent me to Panama. So
Oh wow. And then what
hmm
exactly is the Peace Corps? Because like I've heard of it,
hmm
but it wasn't until you got into it where I was like, oh,
yeah,
let
yeah.
me do some research and figure it out, figure out what
hmm
this is. But I know a lot of people don't even know what that is. So if you can just
yeah,
explain what that is.
yeah, no, of course. I didn't even know about Peace Corps until I moved to DC and lived there for a couple months. But
Mhm.
so basically, Peace Corps is an organization that belongs to the US government. And it was started by President Kennedy,
Mhm.
um, just with everything that was going on back then. And the reason, essentially, the reason the organization was started was because um, President Kennedy wanted to sort of bridge connections between the United States and other countries.
Mhm.
So really the like top main goal of Peace Corps is integration into other countries and a sort of cultural exchange. But they do that through many different programs. So for example, in Panama, we had 4 programs. My program was the Teaching English, Leadership, and Life Skills, um, where I would go and work with the schools. And then there was a water and sanitation program, an agricultural one, and things like that. So worldwide, there are many different programs that Peace Corps sort of uses to integrate into other countries and not only like share our skills or our culture, but also bring that culture back with us to the United States. So one of the things that we are told as Peace Corps volunteers is that, you know, we're encouraged to sort of talk about our experience through seminars. So a lot of volunteers actually come back to the United States and share their experience in schools or with like youth groups and things like that. So that's a major part of um, what Peace Corps is and does. I don't know if I explained it well, but
No, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So is
it's
it
like a,
voluntary, or do you get some sort of payment, or is it just run by the government? Do you get an allowance? So how does it
yeah. So basically, we are volunteers, so we don't get paid,
work?
but we do get like a lump sum of money for, you know, rent or food and things like that, and travel expenses. But it's honestly, it's a really good organization. After you complete your 2 years, which I was supposed to do, but I didn't get to, you get a certain amount of money, and they call it your readjustment allowance. So
Okay.
it's the money that you are supposed to use to sort of integrate back into your life in the United States, you know, so you can use that to rent an apartment or, you know, get a car, things like that. And luckily, because I was evacuated and didn't get to finish because I left Peace Corps, you know, not by my choice, they do give me that money. So I'm
Wow.
really lucky in that sense. Yeah.
But as soon as it's back on and popping, you're gonna go again for sure, right?
See, that's the thing. Like, they don't know. They can't say anything for sure. So they were telling us at first that maybe we could come back and finish our year. So I completed a year, so that means I would have a year left. So they were saying maybe we could come back and go into our same community and finish. But by the looks of it, Peace Corps, well, by the looks of it, the coronavirus, who knows, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think by the time that they're able to get clearance to go back into the countries, they won't let me just go back to my community and finish my service. They'd want me to reapply for another 2 years, and I'd probably get sent to another community. And so I don't think that's something that I want to do, which is really heartbreaking because I really love my community and I really wanted to go back and just, you know, finish my service and work
Yeah.
in the schools. But who knows? Maybe I can go back and just
Mm-hmm.
visit the community. But yeah, that was the really heartbreaking part. That was the reason I was like crying, you know, when
Yeah.
we
I'm
got evacuated.
sorry.
I was like, no, I wasn't ready to say bye. Not yet, you know.
Were you
But
able to say bye to people, or?
oh my gosh, no, no, I couldn't. I mean, the friends that I was with, so I was with a group of friends when I got the text,
Mm-hmm.
and so they helped me pack and things like that. And them I was able to say bye to, but the rest of the community, no. And that I think was one of the hardest parts for all volunteers, was just like you didn't get to say bye to everyone. You know, I had a host family that I didn't get to say bye to. I had friends who helped me in the community who really, you know, took me in as their family and made me feel welcome, and I didn't get to say bye to them.
Oh
So
my
it was
God,
really sad.
Jen. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
I know, it's crazy,
Do
crazy,
they
crazy.
do they have like this communication? Do they have computers, or do you know that you can maybe kind
Yeah,
of assist?
so most of them, most people in Panama, and I think most Latin American countries have WhatsApp. So, you know, with WhatsApp you can video call and you can chat. But I think most people don't really have Wi-Fi or unlimited
Yeah.
internet, so that would make it, you know, a bit of a challenge because Peace Corps' goal is to develop communities. They send us to more rural, like, you know, lower income areas. And so most people don't even, some volunteers didn't even have electricity or running water
Wow.
because the community didn't have that. But I was lucky, I was in a pretty big community and I was able to get Wi-Fi and do, you know, use my computer and things like that. So most people in my town do have that. And so I am able to communicate and just video call and things like that.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did you live with a family, or did you live alone?
Mhm.
How was that?
So with Peace Corps, um, we are we live with host families.
Okay.
So I lived, but Peace Corps Panama is unique in the sense that we only have to live with the host family 3 months, and then we can move out on our own. So I did live with a host family for about 3 months, a little over 3 months. And then I was able to find a house and live, on my own. But honestly, without that host family, it would have been so much harder to just learn the ways of the community and learn, how things are. They are really, special to me, and I still call them and text them, and they're like family to me. So that's
Yeah.
really, really good thing.
I'm so sorry, Jen. I see
I
you're
know.
heartbroken.
I know. It
Oh,
is.
I'm
It's
so
like,
sorry.
but just try to take it for what it is and do it the best that I can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh-huh.
So tell us a little bit about Panama. What is it like
Mm-hmm.
living in Panama and South America, even?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been anywhere outside the country.
Yeah.
How is that?
Mm-hmm. So Panama is very hot, which is kind of cliche to say, but honestly, the way the sun burns out there is different. It's different. Like the few times that I went to the beach, or just even walking around outside my community, like I would get tan really quickly, and I'm lucky because I tan. Some people burn. So
Mm-hmm.
you really, I use sunscreen and things like that, which I never, here in the States, I never wear sunscreen. It feels like the sun is like so much closer. I don't know why. um and then let's see, Panama, it's a really, it's almost like Puerto Rican culture, like the good and the bad,
Mm-hmm.
like you have the loud music, you have the really unhealthy but delicious food. You have men hitting on you all the time, things like that. But overall, I think it's a beautiful place. They have lots of beautiful like scenery, lots of beautiful waterfalls, beautiful beaches. And surprisingly, Panama has a really good bus system. So because I wasn't allowed to have a car, like I was still able to travel and get around pretty easily. Um, but I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's it's a beautiful place, and I had my good days and my bad days, but overall, I would go back if I could, and
Yeah.
it was really good, really
That's
good
awesome.
experience.
And
Yeah.
then the language, I'm
Hmm.
sure they speak Spanish, obviously, but how is
Hmm.
it different from like our Puerto Rican Spanish?
Yeah. So that's actually a really funny one because they taught me so many bad words.
Oh
And
my God.
even, I know, even words that like I never learned in my household growing up because, why would I? You
Exactly.
know, but so, well, yeah, no, I can't talk about those, but they used a lot of the similar words that we use in Puerto Rico, but they use them differently.
Okay.
And like, for example, they had a lot of different words for beans. So, in Puerto Rico, you kind of say like habichuela roja,
Uh-huh.
habichuela negra, whatever. They had like frijoles and habichuelas and porotos and la la la, and just different words. And I remember like I had never learned what they were. I like a lot. One of the things over there is that if you visit people, they give you food and things like that. They offer you something to eat, and I would just never get it right. They would give me beans, and I'd be like, "Oh, these are really good, habichuelas, qué rico," da, da. And they'd be like, "No, those are poroto," or "No, those are frijoles." I'm like, "Sorry, like
Mm-hmm.
I'll never get it right." But it was really fun. It was really fun. And even within Panama, like within the provinces, they all have sort of their different lingo, their different accent.
Mm-hmm.
And in some provinces in Panama, they don't speak Spanish.
Okay.
They speak a language called Novere, which is like the indigenous people's language,
Mm.
which is actually interesting, because I never would have imagined, the Panama has such cultural diversity that's not something you really learn, in the States. We don't
Yeah.
really even talk about that. But it was so interesting. And they had, so in different provinces, they had, you know, a Latino culture, they had indigenous, they had like Black, and the indigenous cultures sort of, it's like a culture within a culture. They're very prideful, you know, that they're indigenous. They're like so proud of their culture, their language. So that was really interesting. And the way they dress is just so unique. It was so beautiful. It was really cool to learn that. That's something I never knew.
Wow, that's awesome. That
Mm-hmm.
sounds so good. Like we were actually gonna go to Cuba a few months ago. Like a few not a few
Mm-hmm.
months ago, I'm lying. In a few months. A
Mm-hmm.
few months ago we were planning to go. But
Uh-huh.
obviously this whole thing just kind of canceled everything.
I
But
know.
like that was gonna be my first missions trip. And I know
Yeah.
Cuba is close by, but it was
Yeah.
safer to go close by. But eventually it was me and Anthony's plan to start off small with Cuba because it's right
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
then the next one would be South America,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I can't wait for it to happen in the future,
Mm-hmm.
because I hear
Mm-hmm.
so many people talking about, their country, the countries down there, whether it be Ecuador or Panama or
Mm-hmm.
Argentina,
Mm-hmm.
Colombia, like I would love to at least say that I was there. Even whatever
Yeah.
country or what it is, just say
Uh-huh.
that I was there and experience that.
Yeah.
And that's just so awesome that you got to experience that, at least for
Mm-hmm.
this time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do people in so okay, my first question before I go into this one is, did they ever call you like la gringa because you came from the
Yes.
States?
Yes. And it would bother me so much, but I got used to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would tell them, I'm like, I'm not gringa. And they'd be like, well, you're from, the United States. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, but I'm Puerto Rican.
That's
So,
so funny. So my next question would be, how do people in South America like view the United States?
mhm.
So, they're living in Panama, so how do they see the United States? Like,
Yeah,
how do they see it?
yeah. So, okay. One of the major things that people talk about in Panama is the invasion. So they talk about when the United States, quote unquote, invaded.
Oh wow.
And it's sort of like a sensitive subject. A lot of people, are upset by it. And there's a lot of political reasoning and a lot of like history that I'm not even too clear on. I know that the United States did invade to get rid of the dictator,
Mm-hmm.
but I also know that the motives weren't, were probably not so innocent,
Yeah.
and there was a canal involved, and the United States wanted control of that. So you sort of get that negative or those negative vibes from a lot of the older people
Mm-hmm.
who were alive when that happened, and I understand, I never get into political scuffles with people. But at the same time, a lot of people in Panama see the United States with that sort of like land of opportunities mentality, and they talk about the United States and how free everyone is and how, there's sort of no pressure, cultural pressure, because, a lot of Latin American countries, you have culture and religion intertwined.
Yeah.
And so, even, in my community, there was a lot of that where certain things are seen as bad, and like in most cultures they have their things, but a lot of people are like, well, in America or in the United States, like, people don't get in your business and people don't care if you have tattoos, or people don't care about this or that. So it was interesting to see, like, how there are such different views,
Mm-hmm.
mixed within the culture. But overall, I think, especially with people our age, our generation, they sort of see the United States as somewhere that they would like to go one day, and somewhere
Okay.
they'd like to visit or live. So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Mhm.
So, what is your most treasured memory of the places that you've lived or visited?
Let's see. There's so many. So okay, in China, just going back to China,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most treasured memories, let's see, I have would be just being able to walk on the Great Wall.
Wow.
I feel like, yeah, when I was doing it, I didn't realize how much of a big deal it is just to witness and see such a historical landmark.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. Um, in Indonesia, actually, I didn't really talk much about it, but in Indonesia, I met a lot of Muslim people, and that was the first time in my life that I had ever been exposed really to Muslim culture or religion, along with Hinduism. And it was really interesting and cool to see how actually similar it is to Christianity. And that was sort of eye-opening for me,
Mm-hmm.
just because I had never been exposed to anything like that. And that was a really cool experience. And let's see, Panama. I think in Panama, what I'll take most are the relationships I built with people in my community. So many nice people who, would take me out or would be like, hey, we're going to the river, come on. Hey, we're doing this, let's go dancing, let's go do this. Like everyone was really welcoming. And that's something that I haven't experienced in any of the places I've been to, just how open people are and how welcoming and inviting, people are to outsiders.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So what advice would you give to someone who wanted to be part of the Peace Corps or any organization that helps the less fortunate in other countries? So what advice would you give to that person, that young person that's like listening to this podcast and is
Mhm.
getting that little quiver, that
Yeah.
quiver in their heart and like, man, I could see myself doing this, like what advice would you give to that person?
Yeah. I would say, it's probably going to sound cliche, but just do it, like
Mhm.
a lot of times, even for me, when I was thinking of traveling or thinking of doing this or doing that, there was always like things in my mind like, oh, but I'm going to miss my family, or oh, like my mom won't approve, or oh, I need a stable job. I need to be able to buy a house in a couple years. And honestly, I would say just do it. I feel like you gotta enjoy, your life as much as possible, and you know, later you have time for those things later, and it's not for everyone because it's not saying that one life choice is better than the other, but if this is something that you're really passionate about and you want to help people, things will fall into place. Just take that first step, and reach out to people who've done it, because there are so many people doing similar things, traveling and helping and things like that. So I'd say just do it, even if you're afraid.
Yeah, for sure. So my next question was like, what are the steps that someone would need to take to be part of the Peace Corps? And I know that right now it's
Hmm.
on a halt,
Yeah.
but when it eventually
Hmm.
picks up again, because I'm declaring that it will,
Yeah.
what would you need to do?
So first thing I would say is you go on the website and see what positions are available, which, like you said, probably for a while there won't be anything really available, but I do believe it's going to open up, even if it, takes a year or whatever. I do see it coming back because it's such a good organization. So, go on the website, look at what positions are available. Um, and look at what positions align with your skill set. So for me, teaching was a thing, teaching English. So I looked for teaching English positions. And once you do that, it's pretty straightforward. They're really good about explaining what you have to do. You apply, they do an initial interview, then they tell you, yeah, like now you have to do all these other things, like medical stuff and background checks and things like that, but they're really good about explaining exactly what you need to do. And I'd say also, if you look into a specific country that you want to apply to, don't believe everything you're told about the country because the things that I looked up things on YouTube from Panama, and they were nothing like what I experienced,
Yeah,
so don't believe everything you see on the internet and things like that.
that's good. That's some
Uh-huh.
very good advice.
Yeah.
Good. And then, to finalize our conversation,
Mhm.
what are your plans or your goals for the future? I mean, despite what's happened,
Yeah.
but like I heard you were mentioning grad school, like you want to go
Mhm.
back to school, like what are your plans, with your experiences that you've had and
Mhm.
moving forward from now?
Yeah. So that's a good question. There's a lot, up in the air, but I think that I was lucky enough to have so much free time during this year that I was able to think about what I want to do.
Mhm.
And I know that going back to grad school is something that I'm really interested in. I'd like to get a master's. I was thinking international development or something related to, working with different countries. So that's something that I'm looking into, as well as getting a job. So I've been, during the quarantine, we have a lot of time. I've been applying and looking for jobs and things like that. And I think that now that I'm reaching I am in my late 20s,
Mhm.
soon to be 30, I I want to look into sort of settling down, and not necessarily like in a relationship or romance, but more like getting, maybe buying a condo or doing something like that,
Yeah.
something quote unquote adultish, um, and just setting some roots somewhere, in the United States. And in the really far off future, I think you know this about me, Ceci, but I've always wanted to adopt. So
Mhm.
I'm also considering that, maybe after grad school and after getting a place, looking into adopting. So
That's
that's all
beautiful.
I got.
No, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then my last question, like, what have you learned from
Mhm.
serving in other countries?
Um, gosh, I've learned so much, but I think one of the most funny, kind of interesting things I've learned is that children are children, and they're the same anywhere in the world. Like,
Mhm.
you know, and that's the same for adults and humans, in general. I feel like it's been so interesting to just have different teaching experiences all over the world. Um, and just seeing the similar things that kids do. My children in the United States, my children in China, my students in Panama, they all misbehave in the same way. They all joke in the same way. They all, they do the same things. And I'm like, you guys are so annoying, but I love you. They're the same.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that because
Mhm.
now that you said that, is true. Like
Yeah.
I'm like thinking about I'm dissecting what you're telling me, and it's true.
Hmm.
Kids will be kids, and
Yeah.
that's why, like, turning Bible right now, but that's why the Bible says like that we need to have like the mindset of a child in order to go
Yeah.
into the kingdom, because like children are just children. They're
Uh-huh.
equal across the board,
Yeah.
and the wonder that they have, and
Mhm.
just the innocence and all of that, like, it's true. Like, and sometimes we just, I don't know, we just don't think about that because we're so like closed in and so closed
Yeah.
minded,
Mhm.
by our lives and our politics and our countries,
Mhm.
and I don't know, you've inspired me so much.
Aw.
And I just, again, I just want to thank you for doing this, and like, Jen, like, you're my girl, like, for
Aw.
life, that.
Yeah.
And we
Love
don't
you.
talk every day, and but I still follow you, I still
Mhm.
pray for you, and you're my walking diary, everything about me. We've gone
Yeah.
through some stuff
Yeah.
together,
We have.
and I'm just so proud of every single decision that you've made in your life
Aw.
up till now, and
Mhm.
I'm just excited, for the future,
Mhm.
for you. So I just thank you for doing this. Thank you for
Yeah.
informing us, of your experiences traveling the world, and and just being a light in
Yeah.
other
Aw.
places.
Thank you. I want to thank you because, I mean, I feel like I've known, about this desire that you've had, for so long from the beginning. And it's so amazing and crazy to see it come full circle. So I feel honored. I'm so honored that, you asked me to do this. And,
Of course.
You're my girl too.
Thank you so much, Genesis, for joining me at the table today. Love you, girl. And thank you all for tuning into Benevolence, where kindness matters and all are welcome to the table. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Benevolence Podcast or at I am Sassy Diaz to know a little bit more about me and Benevolence. Benevolence Podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeart, and the Stitcher app. Make sure to check out our new Benevolent Wednesday feature, where different women share their stories of what God has done in their life. And stay tuned for next Monday's episode of Benevolence. You don't want to miss it. Bye!